Anyways, officially we're week 5. We're 5 weeks into this wisdom path of the year in the wisdom of God. A little less than a year. It's going to be about 48 weeks or so. We missed 4 weeks in January, okay? Over the last month, we've done a lot of work. We've done a lot of heavy lifting. We've done a lot of hammering, right? We've worked on setting our compass towards Jesus, our North Pole, right? We've hewed the pillars of our characters as we're trying to set a foundation of what it looks like to be a Jesus follower. And last week, we fixed the rudders of our mouth. We talked about how the tongue has the power of life and death. And I think the one word that I heard more anything about that message was conviction. Convicting. Nobody wanted to hear it. I didn't want to preach it. Today there's people over here so I can look at you and talk. Thanks, guys. But today we're going to look at the hands. We're going to talk about the hands. Work, okay? We're going to talk about your work. We're going to talk about work. And I want you to think about these statistics. So here comes some numbers, because numbers are important, okay? The average person will spend roughly 90,000 hours of their lifetime at work. 90,000 hours of their life at work. 90,000 hours on an average lifespan is just about 13% of your life. 13% of your life you will spend working. I don't know about you, but to me that's a massive percentage of the breath that God has given you to spend somewhere. But here's the problem. Here's what I see as our conflict, the thing that we ought to wrestle with. Most of us treat our job like it's completely disconnected from our spiritual life. We think church is what we do on Sunday, and work is just the necessary evil we do Monday through Friday so that we can pay the bills and eventually retire happy. But I'm here to tell you, Proverbs tells us something radically different than that. In the economy of God, your work is not disconnected from your spiritual life. It's the primary arena for your spiritual life. In fact, God cares deeply what you do with your hands. Deeply. But because work is so central to our lives, is an area where we are most easily deceived. Our culture lies about the purpose of our hands. It hands us two broken blueprints to follow. And we're going to look at both of them. And then we're going to look at what does the path of wisdom, what is the Hakma that we should be participating in? What is the Hakma that we need to be able to allow God to effectively use our hands? Okay? So let's look at the first broken blueprint. And that blueprint is the first lie, is the idol of the hustle. The idol of the hustle. Okay? Culture tells us you are what you produce. You are what you produce. If you want to be important, you have to grind 24/7. Your net worth is your self-worth, is what the world tells us. The hustler believes that their hands are their North Star on their compass. They think that if they just work hard enough, that they can control the ocean, even though they're just a boat. But look at the warning that Proverbs, the warning wisdom of Proverbs gives us. Way to go, Christopher. Here's the warning, ready? Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone. For they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. Notice what it says. Do not trust your own cleverness. The hustler is trusting that their own hakma is right and what God tells them is wrong. That their skills are more important and more viable than the skills that God wants to teach us about using our hands in the work that we do. If you are sacrificing your marriage, your health, your children, your soul on the altar of your career, you're building a house that will collapse. Because the moment you turn around, that wealth will sprout wings and fly away. But the hustle doesn't just hurt you. The hustle hurts the people living in the house that you're building. Because if the first warning that Proverbs gives us wasn't enough, listen to this incredible one. The greedy bring ruin to their own household. But the one who hates bribes, they live. When work becomes an idol, your household pays the price. You might be physically sitting in the living room, but mentally you're answering emails, you're answering phone calls, you're planning training, you're planning this, you're doing that. What's the next thing? So let me introduce you to a guy named Marcus. Marcus isn't a bad guy. In fact, Marcus is a lot like many of you men and women sitting in this room like now. Marcus loves his family and he wants his kids to have the life that he never had. Do you remember in week 3? Marcus wants to be the ultimate provider. Marcus starts hustling. He takes the promotion, he works 60 hours a week. He tells his wife, it's just for this season. Just until the house is paid off. Just until the car is paid off. Just till. But the season never ends. The hustle becomes his master. His net worth starts going up, but his soul starts to dry out. One Friday night, Marcus is supposedly off the clock. And he's sitting at the dinner table with his wife and his kids. The food is hot, the family is together. But Marcus isn't actually at the table. His body is sitting at the dining room table, but his mind is still at his office. His phone, the digital GPS we've been talking about, buzzes in his pocket. And he pulls it out under the table. Just a quick email. Just putting out a little fire. Meanwhile, his 6-year-old daughter is trying to tell him about his day. Daddy, look at me. Daddy, look at this drawing I made. Daddy. Marcus gives the classic hustler response. Oh, honey, that's great, sweetie. That's great. Awesome. But he never looked up from his screen to actually see the picture that she drew. His wife looks at him from across the table, exhausted, and says, Marcus, put the phone away. You're missing it. You're never really here. And because Marcus's idol is now being challenged, he gets defensive. And he reaches for the sword instead of hearing the heart of his wife. He snaps back. I'm providing for this family. Do you know how much pressure I'm under? Everything I do is for you. You hear it? Listen. Marcus thinks he's building a financial fortress for his family. He thinks his hands are doing a noble thing. But because he trusts his own cleverness, because he has made an idol out of his productivity, he is fulfilling exactly what Proverbs warns us about. He brings ruin to his household. He is trading the actual soul of his wife and his kids for a paycheck that proverb says will eventually sprout wings and fly away. He is sacrificing the people in the house to build a ladder that leads to nowhere. Now, while the hustler thinks their hands can build a tower towards heaven, eventually their hands just tear down everything that they're own. But on the other side of that coin, on the other side of that path is another extreme. And honestly, this one I think is just as dangerous as the idol of hustle, and that is the illusion of the sluggard. The illusion of the sluggard. If the hustler's worship works, if the hustler worships work, the sluggard despises it. The sluggard believes work is a curse. They think the ultimate goal is to kick back in Lady Folly's velvet chair and do absolutely nothing. I just want to get to the weekend. I just want to get to retirement so I can finally stop. But if you're breathing, he's not done with you yet. But work isn't the result of the fall. Work isn't a result of the fall in Genesis. God gave Adam and Eve a garden to cultivate. They were working in the garden before they sinned. They were to cultivate the earth. They were to subdue it and multiply. That's work. Work is a holy assignment. It was only the thorns and thistles that came from the curse. The land became hard. But because of the thorns, work is hard, and the sluggard avoids hard things at all cost. Listen to this hysterical and tragic picture that Proverbs gives us. The sluggard says, "There's a lion in the road, a fierce lion roaming the streets." Do you see what the sluggard is doing? Do you see it? They're making up ridiculous excuses to avoid doing the work. I can't go outside to plow the field. There might be a lion out there. They're paralyzed by hypothetical obstructions that don't really exist. What happens when you live like this? Well, a good thing Proverbs is there because it tells us the craving of the sluggard will be the death of him because his hands refuse to work. The sluggard still has cravings. They still want a good marriage. They want a deep relationship with God. They want to be physically healthy, but their hands refuse to do the daily grind. And listen what happens to their house. I went past the field of the sluggard, past the vineyard of someone who has no sense. Thorns had come up everywhere. The ground was covered with weeds, and the stone wall was in ruin. Notice what the sluggard did. Do you see what he did wrong? Absolutely nothing. They didn't plant the thorns. But here's the thing, they didn't intentionally tear down the walls. The thorns grew because the sluggard was passive. The decay of the wall is a natural result of not taking care of it. I have to be careful, so I want you to hear me, please, okay? If you are retired today, hear this. Retirement from a career is not retirement from the kingdom of heaven. If you're breathing, God's not done. If you pull your hands off the plow of your marriage, off the plow of your family, off the plow of your prayer life, off the plow of your community, The weeds will take over the field. You cannot stop hewing the stone. Let's go back to Marcus for a second. Let's say Marcus finally gets a wake-up call. His wife finally slaps some sense into Marcus. He realizes his hustle is actually destroying his family. He looks at his exhausted wife and he says, you know what? You're right. I need to pull back and I need to prioritize, that's a fun word, my family. So Marcus sets a boundary. Boundaries are important and they're very, very useful tools. He starts leaving the office at 5 p.m. no matter what. He comes home, but here's the thing. Marcus doesn't replace his hustle with wisdom. He lets the pendulum swing way the other direction to complete opposite extremes. He becomes the sluggard. Marcus thinks that because he's clocked out of the job, he gets to clock out of life. He walks through the front door, he drops his keys, and he collapses right into the velvet chair of Lady Folly, i.e., his recliner. I have a recliner. He grabs the remote. He pulls out his digital GPS, and he completely checks out on the other extreme of life. His wife comes to him and says, Marcus, the kids are struggling. We need to sit down and pray with them tonight. And Marcus reaches for what I'm calling the sluggard's favorite tool, the excuse. You remember the lion in the road? Marcus says, they're too hyper right now. It'll just be a fight. Let's do it tomorrow. Lion in the road. She says, Marcus, we haven't been on a date in 2 months. We need to connect. I'm starving for connection. He says, I worked all day to provide for this family. I'm exhausted. I just need to rest tonight. Lion in the road. Listen. Marcus isn't yelling at his wife. He isn't actively tearing his house apart. But look at his fields. Because his hands refuse to work, because he refuses to do the daily grind of hewing the stone of his marriage, a year goes by, then 2 years. And he didn't plant the distance between him and his wife. He didn't plant the spiritual apathy in his kids. He didn't pull the weeds out either, though, did he? He didn't stop the thorns from growing in the grass. Suddenly, Marcus wakes up one day, looks at the stone wall of his family and realizes it's an absolute ruin. The plumbing is leaking out behind the nice, pretty gold facade that he thought he built. The house is cold. The fire's gone out. He thought he was choosing peace by avoiding the hard work of relationships and work. But he actually just became a sluggard, falling asleep in the overgrowth of his garden, wondering why his life was being choked out by thorns. And here's the thing. Apathy isn't rest. Apathy is a slow motion collapse. Now, just to be real and just to be raw with you for a second, I have been both versions of Marcus. Don't believe me? Ask her. She's sitting right there. She'll tell you the truth. Okay? I have been the guy who comes home and I can't stop thinking about work. I can't stop looking at my phone. I can't stop thinking about what the next thing is, what the next thing is, what the next thing is. I can't help but fill the conversations at the dinner table with work and work and work. And that mainly, those seasons of my life, I can look back and see where I was in charge of some kind of big project, where I was working 60 hours plus a week. Because the job had to get done, and the job consumed me, and it became my master. I've also been the guy who comes home and picks up his phone and disappears into a game. Honestly, Carol said last night she told me, she goes, I don't know when you're looking at your phone if you're playing a game or if you're listening to me. Got it. Cool. No hands needed. I hear nothing around me. I miss the questions asked of me by my kids, by my wife, by anybody around me. So here's the question. If you're not supposed to be the frantic hustlers and you aren't supposed to be the apathetic sluggard, what does the wise path actually look like? What's the God way of doing work with our hands? Well, Proverbs tells us to look at the dirt. It says this, go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in the summer and gathers its food at the harvest. Look at the ant. Here you go. I made a pretty picture for you. Look at the ant. I don't know if it's pretty or not. It's an ant. I mean, come on. It carries things that are twice, 2, 3, 4 times its weight. And the ant gives us 3 parts of the holy work blueprint. And here they are. The first one is this. The ant has self-leadership. The ant has self-leadership. I think this is probably one of the most important leadership styles there is, because if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead anybody else. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler. The ant doesn't need a boss breathing down its neck to get things done. The ant doesn't need external pressure. It has internal integrity. It does the right thing even when nobody is looking. The second thing the ant has is foresight. Foresight. It stores up its provisions in summer. The ant understands seasons. It knows that winter is coming. This is the window stone of prudence that we talked about in week 3. The stone that we're supposed to hew into a pillar. The ant doesn't just eat everything today. It works today to protect tomorrow. And lastly, the ant has diligence. The ant has diligence. It gathers its food at harvest. The ant doesn't complain about the work. It just picks up the leaf, puts it on its back, and it walks. It does it over and over and over and over again and again and again. The ant doesn't work to build an empire for itself like the hustler. It doesn't lay in bed with making excuses about the lions in the street like the sluggard. It works quietly, faithfully, and steadfastly for its creator. So when we think about God, we often think of a king sitting on a throne. And let me be clear, he is a king sitting on a throne. But when the king of the universe wrapped himself in flesh, he didn't drop out of the sky into a palace on a golden throne. No, he showed up in a manger surrounded by farm animals. And Jesus spent 30 years of his life doing manual labors, learning carpentry from his father. Jesus was a carpenter. Just like Paul was a tent maker. Before he ever preached a sermon, before he ever gave us the Sermon on the Mount, he swept up sawdust. He built tables. It's a good thing Jesus was there when they collapsed the roof of that house and dropped the man in, because Jesus could help fix it. Jesus had calluses on his hands long before he had nails through them. In fact, I believe Jesus dignifies the daily grind. So when you go to work tomorrow, or when you change the diaper, or when you sit down to give your kid a lesson at school, at home school, or when you wake up and you don't know what you're going to do because you're retired, you reflect the creator of the universe. Work isn't our identity. And work isn't our curse. Work can be, work should be a holy offering to your King. So tomorrow morning, when you wake up, let's take our hands out of our pockets. Let's stop trying to prove our worth through hustle. And let's stop letting the weeds grow through our apathy. And let's start walking like an ant. Quietly, faithfully, and for the glory of the master builder, our King Jesus.